What do you think? Alright, so House of the Dragon is the prequel show to Game of Thrones, based off George R. R. Martin's fictional historical guide to the Targaryen dynasty. House of the Dragon takes place 200 years before Game of Thrones, and follows the line of King Viserys Targaryen, through both his wife Alicent Hightower and his daughter Rhaenyra Targaryen and their children, all leading up to internal strife within the family and eventual civil war. Like many people, I was disappointed by the end of Game of Thrones. A lot of it came down to the way they chose to approach the material and how they chose to not let go and maybe give the show over to some people who might have wanted to be there. Like many people, I was very cautious with everything I was seeing coming out. I mean, I was obviously happy to see Matt Smith, who I loved from Doctor who I would consider my doctor, because I definitely stopped watching the show after he left. No offense, Peter Capaldi, you're fine. But it was hard to get excited and not just see it as kind of cynical brand extension as opposed to something that needed to be made. And then I watched episode 1. I couldn't help but get sucked in. I was so shocked. I didn't think they could do it. I was like, you're not gonna hurt me again. But they really managed immediately to create a tone that I felt was a little truer to what Martin's books feel like. I was immediately sucked in seeing a different time period of this world that I have grown to love shown on screen, and it was something to behold. It had me. And Matt Smith as Daemon Targaryen is the lifeblood of this show. This guy who we always knew, if you'd watched him in Doctor Who, or you had watched his performances in The Crown or Morbius, all of those traits that he brings as an actor are so finely synthesized in the character of Daemon Targaryen. He just oozes sex appeal and danger, which allows them to really ride that line of hero and villain that make him such an exciting character. One of the greatest risks of this first season was the choice to have it span 20 years, which was gonna necessitate some time jumps. This could have been disastrous. In fact, the entire first 5 episodes, when I was growing to really love Millie Alcock as Rhaenyra and Emily Carey as Alicent Hightower, I was just dreading. Like, oh, how am I gonna feel when we go forward 10 years and it's Emma Darcy and Olivia Cook? And I was wrong. As soon as the time jump happens, Emma Darcy is Rhaenyra and Olivia Cook is Alicent. They are different characters, but it makes sense because what we are seeing is the way in which those 10 years have changed these women, and in many ways hardened them. The dual performances for both characters are absolutely stunning. I grew to love everyone involved. Olivia Cook Emma Darcy is just a revelation. I'm so happy to be introduced to them in this series. They bring this perfect mixture of grace and fire and vulnerability. They really, took the character and ran, and I couldn't imagine anyone else as my queen. Team Black all the way. My queen, Rhaenyra Targaryen. My dragon mommy. Obviously, this is no surprise, but one of the standouts of this season. In many ways, the Sean Bean of this season, though hopefully with less weird, unnecessary comments about filming sex scenes. Paddy Considine as Viserys Targaryen. It was just such a beautiful performance to see his slow deterioration over the course of the series, to see a good man who means well but is ultimately a product of the society that he comes from, despite the fact that he does truly care for his daughter and want the best for her. He's ultimately a very short-sighted king who, despite his good intentions, just can't get out of his own way. Patty's performance is so good because it's both lovable and at times pitiable and ultimately tragic. I love the production of the show. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Sure, like any television show where they have to stretch the budget over multiple episodes, certain effects are going to be better than others. Those are not things that particularly take me out of it. I find if the effects are at least consistent for the most part, I can stand a few wonky ones as long as the story hangs together for me. As an adaptation of what is really sometimes a few sentences turning into one episode, writer Ryan Condal and the writer's room, which was so great to know that they finally had a writer's room, including finally some women in the writer's room, which really shows, because themes aren't just for 8th grade book reports. I think the direction on this show is a real step up from Game of Thrones. There's so much more intention and purpose and subtext happening in the editing choices or the blocking, like who's standing where in the room and what that means and what's that communicating. I mean, one of the greatest set pieces of this season is a man walking from one side of a room to another. It's the most harrowing thing I've ever seen, and it's literally a man walking across a room. But before you go calling me fanboy, there are absolutely criticisms to be had. Because of the fact that the show decides to do 20 years in one season in order to get us to start season 2 off with the true beginning of the Dance of the Dragons, it does mean that there are some sacrifices that are made. There's minor characters that we're introduced to that disappear pretty much off screen. There's new characters who are very important, who are introduced to us pretty much through a cutaway. And there's some conveniences that show up in the storytelling, a few plot contrivances or even some plot holes that are kind of yada-yada'd away. It is not a perfect season of television, but what it is a great season of television. And because of the fact that there is the major recasting of Rhaenyra and Alicent, it is kind of weird that Kristen Cole or Daemon or Otto don't really age all that much. So, it's a little inconsistent in that way. And sure, you could do more of a crazy makeup job on them and you could really go full bore on that. But then you wouldn't have sexy Matt Smith being all sexy and glowery. But all of this is just nitpicky stuff to me, because I think the core of the show, the relationship between Rhaenyra and Alicent and the jockeying for the throne around them, is just so compellingly written and done. And all I wanted to do was just see these two former friends be able to work it out, and felt the growing pit in my stomach as it just became increasingly clear that they were not going to be able to. But also at the end of the day, I can't really be objective about this shit. I love it. I love every little bit of this world, to the point where I choose to make this my main fandom, despite the fact that it will never, ever be finished. House of the Dragon has genuinely reignited my love of seeing this world on screen. I had been so disappointed with the end of Game of Thrones that I really had kind of tossed it away and just retreated into the original text. But here I am, looking like a complete fool, because the show is so awesome and I look forward to it, and I'm very sad that I have to wait till most likely 2024 to see Daddy Matt Smith fight Anime Boy. If I were to try to be objective-ish and step back a little bit outside of my fandom, I would probably put this at an 8 out of 10. A really great, solid start to a show. But if I am to go with what is in my true heart, 15 out of 10, perfect. Don't question my math. 15 out of 10. You heard me. Fight me on it.